Hey guys, this is Blue Forest. I hope you're doing well. So after the last video doing an overview of ROK, today we are going to take a look at ROTK, so LOC2. And so a few preliminary thoughts. I want to talk a bit about preparation. So as I said, with respect to ROK, you want to make sure that you do a few things to prepare yourself when you do ROTK. First of all, you want to make sure that you have a decent stash of items saved up. So that's revives and repair kits. So I would plan your mission to do ROTK a bit in advance. You want to save up any repair and revive kits that you have, as well as those 4-hour crystals, because if you open those up in bulk, open up a lot of them, you will pull some of those kits, and you are most likely going to need some kits for ROTK. You also want to make sure that you have some boosts. So the standard damage boosts are good. And of course, you'll get a free one at the start of the mission when you watch the ad. The standard health boost, and particularly the tier 2 health boost, is very good because that gives you 20% health for 45 minutes. So it's nice and long. And you'll want to have a few of those rampage boosts because those will give you 15 to 25% attack as well. Boosts just help you out. They make you a little bit stronger. They help you last a little bit longer. And so I would highly recommend that you have those saved up, and you want to have some Energon saved. You want to have a budget in case you do need to start spending Energon, because unfortunately the hardest fights are near the end of the map. And so you want to make sure you have some Energon. And if you do need to start buying kits, I would highly recommend that you buy the squad kits, because in general, they're going to be a much better value than the solo kits, especially because you have a 5-person team. So buying a squad kit is going to be a lot cheaper than buying 5 solo kits. A couple things about ROTK. It is a lot harder than ROK, okay? The ratings of the bots are much higher. So in ROK, the health of the average bot is about 400,000. In ROTK, it's closer to 1 million. In ROK, the average attack rating is under 1,000. It's pretty low. But in ROTK, it's closer to 2,500. So the bots are a lot stronger. They're also more intelligent. The AI is a little bit smarter. They're better at backing you into a corner. They react a little bit more quickly. And the mods overall are much stronger and much more offensively focused. And so, even very experienced players will have some trouble against certain fights in ROTK, especially considering that a few of the hardest fights in the entire game are in ROTK. So you just have to be mindful of that. So let's go ahead and jump into the map. So the first fight is against Primal. He is on a melee damage mod. His melees will do 300% additional damage. It's a lot. And so you have to be very careful with his melees, because he will definitely be trying to hit you a lot, and they will do a lot of damage if you start getting hit, okay? Now, the main issue with Primal is that he is incredibly tanky. And so this fight can actually be the fastest, one of the easiest fights for you, or one of the most painful and longest fights. It's all about who you use. So I would highly recommend that you bring a very smart, strong armor breaker, particularly OGM. He's the most widely used choice because people have him, and he does great against Primal. Okay, because you can steal his buffs, you can steal both his armor and his melee damage, and OGM can do phenomenal damage when he steals those buffs. It just makes the fight a lot easier. I used OGM against Primal. I think the fight was only about 100 hits, which was by far the fastest fight on the map. Besides OGM, Nemesis can do very well, actually. A lot of people don't have him, but he is a very strong choice. I actually did a video on this about a week ago using my rank 4 Nemesis against Primal, and he did very well. If you don't have OGM or Nemesis, you could bring Ultra Magnus. It'll certainly be a longer fight. If you have Starscream, a decent SIG, and you play very well with him, that could work, but that'll also be a longer fight. So the point is, if you don't have a strong armor breaker, it's going to be a crazy long fight no matter who you use. Even if you're using a bot like Tronus, it'll just be super long. So I would definitely recommend that you bring one of those ideal tacticians like OGM or Nemesis. And with Primal, the last thing that I should mention is that he is pretty clever in using his specials. They're not very hard to dodge, but I would say especially with the special one, it kind of comes out of nowhere in this fight, and so just be very careful when you're dashing at him, because he will often, if he has a bar of power, he will often be able to kind of just launch that the split second before you get up close to him. So make sure that you can dodge his specials, and beyond that, just be careful with his melees in particular, and if you're using one of those tacticians, you should do just fine. So next up, we have Dinobot. So Dinobot is on an armor piercing mod, 150% additional armor piercing, which of course is combined with his normal armor piercing with his melees. So he can do a lot of damage if he starts to hit you with those sword attacks. The good news is this fight is one of the easiest fights in the map. Dinobot does tend to be quite predictable. He's not very difficult. The one thing I would mention though is be very careful with his parry. So if you start hitting into his block, he is going to do damage to you. If it happens a couple times, it's no big deal. But if it happens over and over again, you are going to take a lot of damage. And so if you do hit into his block, make sure you back off. Don't just keep trying to hit him. All right. Most people will use Tronus against him. You could use OGP against him. I mean, there's no specialty bot really needed for him because he is one of the easier fights on the map for sure. So next up, we have Ramjet. So Ramjet is on a very strong special damage mod. Specials will do 300% additional damage. That is very powerful. And if he ends up tagging you with the special, it's going to do crazy damage, which combined, by the way, with his SIG, which gives him special damage buffs, I mean, he can do insane damage with his specials. Thankfully, he tends to telegraph his specials pretty well. They're not very difficult to dodge, but do be mindful of his special 2. It can kind of come out of nowhere. And of course, his special 2 will usually stun as well. So you do not want to eat a special 2 and then get stunned. Beyond that, though, he's not very tricky. The one thing that is a little bit difficult about him is his heavy, right? Because he has that unstoppable heavy and he will use it a lot in this fight. So just be very careful. Again, particularly when you're dashing at him, he will often try to land a ramming heavy on you. But beyond that, he's not too difficult. People will often use Attack Bot or Tronus against him. So next up, we have Shockwave. Okay, so Shockwave is one of the harder fights. It's probably the first truly difficult fight for a lot of people because he's on this range damage and speed mod, 300%. It's a lot. And of course, Shockwave loves to fire off those range shots, so they're going to be significantly faster and do a lot more damage. And so even for very experienced players, it can be really tricky to dodge all of those range shots. So thankfully, his specials are not very difficult to dodge, at least a special 1. You do need to make sure you can dodge a special 2. It's not very hard, but you have to get the timing down. The main issue with Shockwave, though, are all those range shots. I would highly recommend you keep your distance. You know, you bait out those shots. Don't be too aggressive. You bait out those specials because if he starts to land shock on you, he's going to be doing a lot of damage. For that reason, I would highly recommend a Purifier. So certainly a bot like Kickback would probably be the best choice because he has both power control and a Purified Shock. Sideswipe can do well. You could use Grim or TC as backup if you need to. And a lot of people will use Prowl because of his power control. Just remember that Prowl does not purify shock. Same thing with a bot like Cheetah or Windblade. They could do very well, but you have to be very careful of not eating any shock damage. So next up we have Prowl. Okay, so Prowl is on this power charge mod where I believe when you hit him about 8 times, he gets the sudden flow of power. And it's a lot, especially when it's combined with his built-in power gain with his SIG, right? And so Prowl is going to be getting special 2 after special 2 after special 2 over and over again. So you can bait out his special 1s as much as possible, but he's going to be getting a lot of special 2s. And so that means that this Prowl fight is not a difficult fight as long as you can dodge a special 2. Okay, if you know how to dodge a special 2, this is not a difficult fight. But if you struggle with that, I would certainly recommend that you practice fighting against Prowl in other game modes first. Because if you end up eating any special 2s, or even if you're blocking them, you're going to take lots of damage and you're probably going to end up dead. It'll be a very frustrating fight if you cannot dodge his special 2. It's not very difficult once you get the hang of it. It's just about timing those dash backs when he fires those shots. But you really need to be able to dodge a special 2. If you can't, the one option you have would be to bring Scorponok, because with Scorp, you can apply Dazed with the special 1 and 3, and then that way, if Dazed is active, if Prowl fires a special 2, it'll just blow right by you. That's good, but I still wouldn't really recommend that because you're not going to be able to apply Dazed like constantly. You know, there are going to be times in the fight where Dazed is not active, and so, you know, Scorp, I would say, would be a backup, but you really want to practice dodging that special 2 if you're going to do well in that Prowl fight. So next up we have OGM. Okay, so OGM is also one of the easiest fights on the map. He's on a very tanky defensive mod, cycle resistance, that's, you know, physical energy resistance, 200% reduced damage, so it's a lot. So it is a long fight because he's super tanky on that mod, but the good news is OGM tends to be quite predictable. He's fairly aggressive. You know, he loves to use his heavy, particularly when the cannon is charged, but he likes to use his specials. They're pretty easy to dodge. Most people will use Tronus against OGM. It's a long fight, but it's not a very difficult fight. The one thing you just have to remember against OGM is that his Unstoppable will activate more often the more health he has lost, right? So when you knock him down, he has a chance to become unstoppable. And so once he gets to, let's say, below 50% health, he is going to get that Unstoppable very often. And so as the fight goes on, when you're knocking him down, make sure that you don't just dash at him when you knock him down. Wait to see if an Unstoppable activates, because if you don't, he's going to be able to, you know, do a bunch of damage to you. But beyond that, it's a pretty easy fight, even though it's somewhat long. So that brings us to Kickback. Okay, Kickback's a very annoying fight for sure. He's not that hard to fight, but the mod is super annoying because he's on a power wipe mod where your power will be wiped out every 30 seconds for the entire fight. And remember that Kickback also has lots and lots of power leaks in his own kit. And so if you don't play this fight carefully, you're going to end up with basically no power throughout most of the fight. You're not going to be able to land specials. So what I would recommend you do is, if you can, bring some sort of power flow, power gain bot. So RC could do very well here, Prowl, Sideswipe, Soundwave, any bot that has built-in power gain or passive power gain could do well, because you want to make sure that you can land specials. Getting up to special 2s as consistently as possible will be a really good idea. And so bringing a bot with, you know, standard normal power gain, you can do okay, but it's going to be hard to land more than special 1s, given how often you're going to lose your power. Cheetor could do well in addition, just because he is immune from power drain. So if Kickback landed power leaks on you, Cheetor wouldn't lose his power. However, Cheetor will still lose the power from the mod, but he is an option. The one thing I would not do is make the mistake I made the first time I used Tronus. That was a very bad idea. I don't know what I was thinking, because with Tronus, you will never even be able to use a special 2, let alone a special 3, because you're losing power so often. So any kind of power gain bot, you will do well, okay? So next up, we have Wasp. Okay, Waspinator is one of the most difficult fights in the entire game. This fight sucks. It's really hard. It's super annoying. And that's because of this mod. So he's on a 1000% range damage and speed mod. It's not a typo. It's not 100%. It's 1000%. So his range shots will be coming at you crazy fast and will do ridiculous damage. The good news is it's timed. So unlike Shockwave, it's not active all the time. It will be on for 7.5 seconds, then off for 15 seconds. So you do have openings to attack him when the mod is off, but you have to be crazy careful when that mod is active, because he can do just ridiculous damage. I've seen him take rank 6 bots from 100% down to 20% with a single heavy. If you eat a special 1, he will kill you, and he can even kill you with a few basic range shots if the mod is active. So what you want to do in this fight is be super patient and careful when the mod is active, and then as soon as you have an opening, when the mod goes off, do lots of attack, land those hits, and then back off again. So for this fight, I would highly recommend one of the shielded tech bots. The safest choice would probably be Wheeljack, especially if Wheeljack's on Nano Repair, because you're going to get that shield activating over and over again, and of course he can heal. And the good news is Wasp does not have any DOT except with the special 3, but of course One thing about ROTK is that the special 3 is locked. That's the one thing that makes it a little bit easier. And so if Wheeljack ends up eating some range shots, and you will end up eating a few here and there, Wheeljack will be protected, and he does have, power control and all of that. So Wheeljack is a very good choice, even though it will be a crazy long fight with Wheeljack. Mirage is probably the best choice if you play well with him, because his shields are great, takes significantly less damage on those specials in particular, and he is immune with his heavy to ranged hits, so if you know how to use his heavy well, he can do very well there. And Mirage has his power gain, and he has his own power burn, and he has those buffs with the special 1, so he can kind of keep Wasp at a distance. I would say Mirage is a great choice if you play well with him. Beyond that, Rhinox can work with his shielding and his shock and everything. Soundwave at high sig can do very well, and Shockwave can do well. So Shockwave is not shielded, however, Shockwave has good power control, but more importantly, he does not take damage from basic ranged attacks when he's blocking to get those energy charges. So if you play well with Shockwave, he is a good option as well. With that said, you are probably going to have to expect to revive in this fight. You might even have to revive several times. Even the best players usually do have to revive. It's just really hard. And so I would use one of those shielded bots first. If you die, you can bring in Tronus. I mean, I think I finished him with Tronus. I don't remember exactly, but he will work as long as you've whittled Wasp down first. Another option, though, a very good finisher, is OGM, actually, because OGM can steal that ranged buff, and OGM can do unbelievable damage if you're able to steal that buff. I would not start the fight with OGM, but if you need to finish it, OGM could be a good one, especially since you have to remember that Wasp does revive, right? With his SIG, when you kill him the first time, he will revive, I think, to about 15% in this fight, 15 to 20. So you are going to have to effectively kill him twice, and that just makes it more annoying. So play him patiently, do not be aggressive when that mod is active, and use a shielded bot if you can. So next up we have Rhinox. So Rhinox is not a very difficult fight. I mean, the mod is pretty standard, right? So stagger with his heavies, he can inflict stun, armor break, or power lock. The one tricky thing, though, is his SIG, right? Because all these bots are SIG 100 or close to it. So he will be able to land a lot of shock on you with those attacks. And so for that reason, I would not recommend using an attack boost when you fight Rhinox. You don't want to amplify that damage, but you can use a health boost. So with Rhinox, definitely Kickback is a great option. You can purify that shock if you can power control. A lot of people do have success with Prowl, but again, you have to be careful because he cannot purify shock. Sideswipe, Grim or TC. I've seen people use Grim or TC. I think I started with Grim, and then I finished him with Tronus. But being able to purify that shock will just make the fight a lot easier for you. So that brings us to Windblade. Okay, Windblade is relatively predictable. She's not the most difficult fight. However, she's on a very strong mod, okay? Because she is on a 200% extended debuff duration mod. And Windy is all about her debuffs. And so that means that if she lands any bleed or shock or stuns on you, you're going to be in big trouble because they're going to last significantly longer. So if she lands, let's say, a bleed on you and she stuns you, that could be like a 5-6 second stun. She's going to be able to do crazy damage to you. So she's not the most difficult fight, but make sure you play her carefully. You can certainly use a bot like Tronus, a purifier like Grim or TC if you have them would do well, just in case you do end up eating any DOT. But otherwise, she's not too bad because she is fairly predictable. So finally, we have Blaster and Grim. So Blaster is an absolute disaster. He's probably the hardest fight. Him and Wasp are definitely the most difficult fights on the map. 2 of the most difficult fights in the entire game. Blaster really, he's just crazy difficult to fight. This is another one that you have to be prepared to revive for because he's on a similar mod to Shockwave, that 300% range damage and speed mod, and Blaster loves to fire off endless ranged shots. It's very difficult to dodge all of them, and they will deal huge damage to you. The main concern, though, with Blaster is, remember, he has that power gain ability with the Special 1, and so you want to avoid his Special 2 at all costs. Because the Special 2 is already tricky to dodge, but even if you're generally good at dodging a Special 2, because of the mod, it comes out even faster than normal, and it kind of tracks you, so it's super difficult to dodge his Special 2 every time, and if he does hit you with the Special 2, it will kill you. Even if you're at 100% health, it can easily kill you. So I would say there's a few good options here. Again, Kickback is a great option because you've got Purification and Power Control. Prowl is great, you know, because you can just drain his power over and over again. I've seen people do well with bots like Wheeljack, you know, get the shielding, so forth. Again, you can always use Tronus to finish him off. But having some combination of power control in particular, as well as possibly purification, because Blaster will certainly shock and so forth, is the best sort of choice there. But like I said, you do need to be prepared to revive because this is not an easy fight. And so finally, we have Grim. So Grim, thankfully, not that difficult, actually. It's a sort of clever mod because on this mod, you lose 0.5% of health every second that you're not attacking. But then when you are attacking, you will heal. So you will heal equal to 20% of the damage that you deal. It's kind of like Nemesis' Sig in that sense. And so you do need to be fairly aggressive in this fight, but thankfully, it's not that hard as long as you play wisely, okay? I will say the first time I did this, I used OGM, who is a very good choice, but I didn't know how quickly I was going to lose health, and so I ended up being way too aggressive, and I ended up making mistakes. When I did it the second time, it was just much better. So the good news is, even though you're going to lose health when you dash back or anything like that, it's not that much health. So what you want to do is you want to attack in big bursts. So every time you have an opening, attack, attack, attack as much as you can, back off, you know, get your positioning right, and then attack again. OGM is great. Probably the best choice because he can steal those buffs, he can do lots of damage. People do well with OGP, I've seen people do well with Nemesis, and of course you can use a bot like Tronus just fine. But a bot like that, you know, where you can steal buffs or copy buffs or just do massive damage like OGP, great options. And like I said, be aggressive, but not too aggressive. And the last thing I'll say about the Grim fight is, remember, you cannot rely on DOT bots. It was clever of Kabam to put Grimlock on this because you cannot use things like Bleed or Shock to whittle his health down. You have to be attacking over and over again because he's going to purify any debuffs that you put on him. But beyond that, it's not a very difficult fight. So that wraps up the ROTK map. I will just say, in terms of teams, I want to go over recommended bots, teams, and so forth. So, first of all, let's talk about the rankings of your bots. Well, I would say if you have a rank 5 squad, you're good to go. You don't have to have rank 6 bots. If you do, that's even better. I think I had one rank 6. I think OGM was my only rank 6 when I did it. But you do want a squad of rank 5 bots. You know, you could do it with rank 4s if you're an amazing player, but rank 5, I would say, is the minimum for most people to feel comfortable. In terms of bots, of course, you want to bring Tronus. Could you do it without Tronus? Yes. But like I said, ROTK is a lot harder than ROK, and Tronus is just built for these fights. He can handle a lot of the fights on the map. If you have him, absolutely bring him. Beyond that, the main bases that you want to cover, okay, are number 1, Armor Breaker, Buff Stealer, like OGM or Nemesis, essential for Primal. It just makes everything way easier. Power Controller, super important for bots like Blaster, for Shockwave, super helpful there. Purifier, you must have at least one purifier, whether it's a shock purifier like Kickback or a general purifier like Grim or TC. You gotta have one because you have a lot of shock bots in particular. If you don't have one, you're going to run into trouble. And like I said, a power flow bot, like an RC, like a Prowl, something like that for the Kickback fight. So I would mainly say, an Armor Breaker, a Purifier, a power flow bot, Tronus, and of course, any healing bots. The same thing with ROK, with LOC1. Healing bots in general, bots like Wheeljack will do very well. Kickback will do very well. You know, any bots that heal that you play well with are going to help you out a lot. It helps to minimize item usage. And then in terms of synergies, if you are bringing OGP, definitely bring Ratchet if you can. Even if Ratchet isn't super high rank, if you play well with OGP, that synergy is amazing, and OGP can handle a lot of these fights. Same thing with the OGP and Jazz synergy. Jazz is also great for long fights. He doesn't purify. He's not as useful for some of these fights as somebody like Kickback, but because Jazz is so amazing in longer fights, he has that permanent backfire. He has the incredible synergy with OGP where he can do ridiculous damage. There are several fights on this map that Jazz could do very well in. If you are using Kickback, remember Motormaster or Ramjet will form out the Enforcer synergy, which is fantastic. So you could bring Ramjet, especially if you don't have a bot like Tronus. And Beast Wars, great idea. Lots of people have used Beast Wars, and you don't have to use 5. You could use 3 of them. So I've seen a lot of people use Primal, Rhinox, and Scorp, bringing Scorp for the Prowl fight, or Primal, Cheetor, and Scorp. Those 2 teams, great, because you can purify. It's a great synergy. So those will be very worthwhile as well. If you do have Tronus and OGM, you have things like the Fallen synergy. So in general, be thinking about your synergies. You want to boost up your bots as much as possible. But remember, you want to make sure that you cover those bases. So in addition to Tronus, you got to have somebody to handle Primal. You got to have a Purifier. You got to have a Power Controller. Preferably, you have some sort of Power Flow bot and at least 1 or 2 healing bots. If you cover those bases, you're going to do a lot better. And then I will finally say, kind of like with ROK, you want to be very patient when you do ROTK. It's longer than ROK. Many of these fights will take a while, so set aside an afternoon, put aside a few hours, do a few fights at a time, play carefully, play patiently, and give yourself breaks. If you do that, you'll have a much better chance of getting through it without having to spend lots and lots of energon. So I will leave it there for now. I hope this has been helpful. Do let me know if you have any questions, and we will speak again soon.